My name is Mia Mikic, and on the behalf of the Friends of the Multilateralism Group, I welcome you all to this session of the MC12 and Beyond interview series. FMG was established in 2016 to promote multilateralism, economic prosperity, and the WTO reform to make it fit for 21st century based on sustainability principles. More about our work you can find on our website. And I'm very pleased and excited, a little bit nervous, to welcome our special guest tonight or this afternoon, depending on the time zone you are in, Anabel González. So Anabel González doesn't really need an introduction, but I just need to say that she has been DDG of the WTO for last year now. It's been a very long year, Anabel. And then, of course, prior to that, she has held many leadership and executive positions, including the Minister of Foreign Trade of her country, Costa Rica, Senior Director of Trade and Competitiveness Practice in the World Bank, and so many other roles. And I think we love her also for starting the trade events, which contributed to the global discussion on trade issues. So thank you so much, Anabel, for doing all of that, but specifically for joining us for this interview. And I think we have had few days to reflect. You had caught up with some sleep, I certainly hope so. Twitterhood, experts, journalists, everyone has already started to sort of share their opinion on MC12. Some use very black and white, yes, no metric. Some are more nuanced. And we have read, thank you very much for the blog of a couple of days back. So for the group and for this interview series, please take us through that blog, perhaps, or add to it, and give us your evaluation of the MC12 achievements. Anabel.
So thank you very much, Mia, for your kind words, and but also for this opportunity to exchange views with you on MC12. So let me maybe start by saying that WTO ministerial conferences are unpredictable events, which usually take a life of their own. When trade ministers from across the world come together, to negotiate a set of complex and sensitive issues in just a few days, quite frankly, no one can really anticipate what will happen. In the last meeting of the WTO's main decision-making body in Buenos Aires did not result in any multilateral outcome. So coming into MC12, expectations were low. We know that multilateralism has been under stress for some time, but we have never really been in a situation where a series of overlapping and compounding crises provided the backdrop for the discussion. A pandemic, a war, supply chain disruptions, a looming food crisis, inflation, deepening geopolitical drift, climate change. So basically, all of this happening at the same time. So while there was not much optimism on MC12, I think the stakes were high. Success, even if modest, was critical, because failure to deliver would have been very detrimental on several counts. It would have been a missed opportunity for governments to use trade collaboration to tackle the pandemic, tackle the food crisis, or the depletion of fish stocks. Failure to extend the moratorium on the imposition of customs duties on electronic transmissions would have been a setback for the continued expansion of the digital economy and the growing number of small and medium businesses and consumers that rely on it. And without the appetite to collaborate, governments would have dealt a blow to the prospects of WTO reform and with it to the future of the organization. Fortunately, ministers opted for success, and against all odds, MC12 delivered. Concrete and tangible results, in my view, confirm that multilateral trade cooperation can respond to the challenges of today's world and can help governments tackle global emergencies, even in the most difficult times. It also, I think, hinted at what the WTO of the future could look like. Perhaps, I think, the most relevant outcome. But MC12 also exposed critical challenges to leveraging the full potential of the multilateral trading system for sustainable and inclusive growth. And we can talk more about that in going forward.
Thank you for doing that. Thank you. So no, I wanted to say I fully agree with you that the expectations going into the round were low, but stakes were extremely high. And your assessment of the risks of not delivering at least something were, I think, quite on the spot. Now, in this Geneva package, that actually looks impressive as compared to the recent rounds, right? Do we have any details about what follows immediately now in Geneva? And can you perhaps give some more details on that?
So when assessing MC12, I think there is more than meets the eye, and let me explain. First, MC12 formal outcomes, I think, pertain to the central issues of today. To address the pandemic, the most important and contentious part clarifies and streamlines the scope for governments to limit patent rights to support the geographical diversification of COVID-19 production, vaccine production capacity. To fight insecurity, food insecurity, members agreed to encourage trade and exempt the World Food Program food purchases from export curbs. On digital trade, members committed not to impose customs duties so that video streaming, financial transmissions, and other electronic transmissions can continue to flow freely across borders. And for the first time in WTO history, members reached an agreement that puts environmental sustainability at its core. In this case, to prohibit subsidies for illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing operations and fishing of overfished stocks, as well as a transparency framework for sharing information. Now, in preparing the way forward, ministers committed to work towards the reform of the WTO to improve on all of its functions. And this is critical, and I think it is the most important task post-MC12. They agreed a process anchored in the organization structure, but with flexibility, and a mandate to report on progress before the next ministerial conference. Moreover, and this is also, I think, quite important, they acknowledge the relevance and urgency of addressing the challenges and concerns with respect to the dispute settlement system, including those related to the appellate body, with the view to having a fully and well-functioning dispute settlement by 2024. Now, I'd say that there is an inconspicuous footnote in the intellectual property decision, footnote 1, that I think is very important because it provides a pragmatic blueprint to support the increased adoption of responsibilities by emerging markets in the system, like China did in this case. And this is quite relevant. This opt-out technique, as I call it, could also prove useful, I think, to facilitate multilateral outcomes by allowing those members that cannot join to stay out, bringing, I think, much needed flexibility to the trading system. And this technique, I think, could pave the way for the reform of the WTO negotiating function. Now, in addition to WTO reform, there is a built-in agenda in a number of MC12 items, including on electronic transmissions, intellectual property, and fisheries. Members would also need to tackle agriculture, where a breakthrough on a future program was elusive in these ministerials. So delegations have their work cut out for them.
I am not muted. Okay, so I think, yes, you are right. There is quite a bit of on the agenda right now and staggered through the year. But I guess it is easier to start building on the success that we had at the end of last week than in the case if we had a failure, because then it will be like clawing out of the hole and it will be much more difficult. But I think there are still lots of not full understanding of what were the actual factors that contributed to achieving the results that were achieved. Was it already shown flexibility in terms of negotiation processes and approaches, including this opt-out that you mentioned, or was it really the pressure of alarmingly increasing number of shocks waiting outside Geneva, outside the walls of the WTO that pressed for the results? And what can we learn from that? What can we bring in this process, in this very packed up agenda that you just described to us, to actually continue moving through it with success?
So these are very important questions, Mia, and I'm thinking through them still. I would probably say that the first and most important factor, of course, is that members found the will to converge. At the beginning of MC12, gaps were wide, for example, on fishery subsidies, and members held opposing views on many things, but for example, on the extension of the moratorium on electronic transmissions. But, as the hours went by, I think there was a realization that something bigger was at stake and that ministers would need to compromise to avoid delivering a major blow to the multilateral trading system. And so they did. Compromise means, of course, that, we did not get everything that was expected, but it also means that we got something to work with and something to build on, as you were saying before. And I think that is so important because for the good part of the last 10 years, it looked like WTO members had almost completely, forgotten about the need to compromise to bring about change in the multilateral system. And this rediscovered ability to compromise can, in my view, set in motion a virtuous circle of incremental steps to build a better trading system. Now, it was not easy. It required, creativity, a lot of dialogue, and hard work. And most important, I would say, it required pragmatism. And pragmatism was evident in the decision to adopt the fishery subsidies deal that the market could bear at the time, or to agree to tackle agriculture later. And I'm still reflecting on, the structure, the actors, the process, the dynamics underlying MC12. But there is one element I would like to highlight as I think it's key, and that is the role of the Director General, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. In the success of MC12, much credit goes to her as she unrelentingly pushed ministers to the brink of compromise. And members, of course, are the ones who agree, but without her strength, her focus, and her determination, MC12 could have failed at any step of the way.
Well, it's fantastic, actually, to, I wanted to bring in also this because she's the first woman DG of the WTO. And, we often hear from the corporate world that women get promoted in high leadership position when those promoting them know that the task is impossible to actually deliver. And this is a fantastic example that there are also different outcomes possible. And so I think it is an inspiration for many other women also working in trade. There are not a sufficient number of those, and we need to work on increasing their role and influence on trade outcome. But definitely, having a role model of Dr. Ngozi is very important. So please pass our special thanks to her role, and we do recognize it very, very much. Just as a side note, I also think, maybe making our ministers sort of more fit and having more stamina to endure all of these negotiations would be part of preparation for MC13. And so we can put them through the rigorous exercise program before they come. But more seriously, I think can you please pass, because I know you have to return to your day of activities, given that you came back from a mission. Can you share a message to the WTO members in this context of trade being solution to many of the problems that we face, now that they can actually cast their view to the horizon of MC13? What would you say to them?
So maybe just first say that many things are impossible until they become possible, right? And I think this is what happened here at MC12. Now, for all its success, MC12 revealed members remain far apart on many issues. Divergent views on the role of trade for growth and development, and of the benefits of trade cooperation were at play. So MC12 is, I think, a very positive step, to be sure, but it is only a broader, a first step in a broader process to rebuild trust and revitalize the WTO, a road which will continue to be bumpy, rocky, and unpredictable. I am hopeful, however. I trust that, as Dr. Ngozi said during the closing session, strategic competition will be able to exist alongside growing strategic cooperation. And MC12 showed we can do it. So the work goes on.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Anabel González, DDG of the WTO, for joining us in this interview session. On behalf of the Friends of Multilateralism Group, we really appreciate your work and your team's work, and we wish you, your team, and WTO members all, the energy, enthusiasm, a common purpose to build on the success of MC12 into MC13. I don't know about the numbers. Should we skip it or not in terms of the meaning of number 13? But it might. I'm sure it will be lucky for us in trade community. So thank you so much for joining us, and to our members, please follow us on our website and see what comes next in our interview series. With that, I close this interview. Thank you so much, Anabel, and goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mia. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.